everyone, and welcome to this channel with Cecilia. And I'm having a conversation today with Steve Adar. And Steve is in the 3P field and living in England. And Steve, you have to do a presentation of yourself. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank
You're
you.
so
Well, thank
welcome.
you. Thank you, first of all, because I didn't know until 5 minutes ago that we were going going to do this.
2 minutes, Steve.
In the moment.
That's why I didn't know what to say. But we take it from here. So you can say a little shortly or something
Sure,
about
sure.
you. Yeah.
So, yeah, so my name is Steve. I live in England with my partner Tony, and I've been around the three principles for coming up for 11, well, 12, almost 13 years now. My background is psychology. I've always been, if you like, a spiritual seeker. I always had a spiritual leaning towards things. And then those moments of truly hearing how life is inside out, those 13 years ago, stopped my searching. And to realize that everything that we are looking for is already inside of us. And if I'm so busy looking for it, then I'm not in the realization of what I heard the first time I had my insight into the nature of who we are. So my practice all changed completely from what I was doing traditionally to working with this understanding that we call the three principles. And also did that my practice change, my whole understanding of who I am continually changes, because what I realized was that these principles are not something that we have to learn. And my psychology was that I need to learn, I've got to learn. And the difference is like I can be more wild by the moment to moment experience now. And that gives me so much more space to be in life than making up so much stuff, which takes up so much of our time, that I can just be in that space the best as it's showing up and just trusting wisdom more. So that's
Yeah.
how I tend to.
How do you came across it? How do you come to this knowing, or when do you felt it
So,
that you can trust it?
as a child, I would say I was very intuitive. Now, I didn't know that's what it was. I could sense things. Um, I would almost feel things before they would happen. And to me, I just thought that was a normal thing. And then when I got to my teenage years, and really the world of thinking comes into our experience then, and we take everything so personal, then that was something that I seemed to push away. But as I fast forward, it was Tony that had the experience first, where he went to listen to something in London and speaking to me and saying, you'll love this, it's spiritual. And I just wasn't interested, because you ever get sometimes in life that you're so full, you just can't take anything else on. And hearing about you need to learn these principles, and that's what I was hearing, was you need to learn about these principles, was like, no, I don't, you can't make me, I don't want to. And I was like, gee, I'm so in my thinking with this. And each time he would say something, I would be like, yada, yada, yada. There he goes again, talking about these principles. I'm not interested. But what happened was he was manager of a homeless charity, one of the managers at that point. And a member of staff was quite a beautiful, spirited woman, but a maverick. So you would say, right, okay, we need to do this. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And she'd go off and do her own thing anyway. And then we would speak about that sometimes over meals when Tony would come from work. And then that stopped. He wasn't coming home and full of all this kind of, and So I'd say, so how is things going on there? Ah, she's still doing what she's doing, but it's all okay. And I was like, huh, how comes it's not changed on the outside circumstances, but you're okay about it? And that kind of consciousness was at play a little bit there. And then I went to different two different speakers that it was on, but I sat there with my thinking. Psychology would say this, psychology would say that, yeah, but. And so, and then I was looking around and seeing that everybody was smiling and happy. And I don't know if I had a frown on my face, but I felt like I had a frown. So my feeling was heavy. So I was more curious about that. But it's when we went out to Salt Spring Island, to Elsie Spitchell and Chip Chipman was doing the school then. And all I can say was that something happened that it showed me the nature of who we truly are. Not because they were saying it, but because I saw and felt it within myself. And I saw in that moment that I am not who I think I am. We are not who we think we are. And that even what we think changes from moment to moment. And then if it doesn't, it's because we are keeping our thinking regurgitating, going round and round and round. And I didn't have to understand that. Whether my psychology was, I would have to, and I just knew that I didn't have to understand that. So for me, I came back and I realized that one of the nights we were laughing, and you ever laugh so much, it's like, oh, please stop. This is, you get in your mouth, you feel it. And I remember thinking, oh my goodness, I forgot how to laugh this hard. My thinking was so serious at times with life that I forgot what it's like to laugh. So then we went back the following year and we spent personal time with Chip and Elsie with another two people, and we did a fellowship with them. And we spent 7 weeks on the island of Salt Spring. And that's where I really got to see not what Sydney Banks was pointing to as in what we must do, but where he was coming from, the nature of who we are. And what I didn't like about it at the time was that I wanted to be taught this. And they didn't teach us anything, but yet they showed the four of us and themselves in those moments the beauty of who we are, the innocence of who we are, the incredible spirit that we are. So that's how I heard in those moments that Steve is just someone I make up from time to time. And I was someone that, in my thinking, didn't like me all the time, would give myself more of a difficult time than an easier time, would be a little bit of a worrier about what other people would think. And I just saw the innocence and all of that. That when we have those kind of thinking, giving on the level of consciousness and thought that we're in, that's all. It doesn't mean that it's who I am. And when I heard Sid say, just because you think a thought, you don't have to believe it. I was like, oh my goodness, I don't. We don't have to believe everything we think. That was so different from me to, yeah, but why are you thinking it? And how are you thinking it? And what do you do with your thinking? It's like, I have been so quiet. And in that quiet, I realize that it's not somewhere I needed to get to. I was saying to you before, it's like the saying between, like even though we have a sentence, but in between each word, there is a space. And in that space, there's a stillness. And that stillness is not something that I create, but the stillness creates the moment. It creates the words, it creates everything from that. And we look around nature and we see with the seasons, it changes through the seasons. So I realized that as human nature, we must change. We must go through different experiences. We can't stay loving and joyful and happy all the time. It's the rising and the falling of the breath, the rising and the falling of consciousness that we understand more. We understand who we are. We get to see, oh, I was a little bit too hard on myself then when that experience was happening, versus why do people do that to me? Oh, that's interesting how I reacted. I was saying to you this morning, because I have the sinus infection going on. And when this morning you said to me, if you feel up to it, we can do the recording. And I had so many thinking, going, oh my God, I don't feel right. What happens if I cough? What happens if I do this? What happens if I thought, gee, Steve, you're not even on the call. The woman simply asked you, would you do it? And you just ran a marathon and you're thinking there. You're just, it's like, but that's all I did. And then I just say, you know what? Just go along and just see. And I think I might have said to you, let's just turn up and see. And that's so much more space
Yeah.
to just see.
And I used to do that too, all the time, planning and planning and planning. But I didn't this day. I didn't, even if it was Steve Adar. I didn't, because, yeah, I don't know, something have changed. I didn't plan that changed either. I just falling into it, the simplicity that I will call it, because I love that it's a simplicity to make it. You take this moment and see what this moment give you, or what this moment is, and then you don't know. We don't know from moment to moment what's going to happen.
But yet, what I love is when you see life naturally, that's the flow of life. We're more present. So it's not like we're just, oh, is this going to happen today? Or is that going to happen? We're actually more present about things happening, because when we're trusting that wisdom of who we're designed, we're letting go of the rules and the regulations and the must do's and the have to's, which keep us in overthinking. And we can drop the agenda that we've made up of who we have to be.
But it's not that I don't do it.
Right.
I'm a human.
Right.
I do that, but I didn't. I felt comfortable, and we had been talking for a while also before we put the recording on, and I see that I don't need to be anything other than and who we are.
That's so refreshing.
Yeah, and that point, that part of us that we want to point to just to rest, to touch that space.
Yeah. It's like when I was saying on Salt Spring Island, what I saw was that this natural state is there all the time, regardless of what thinking we do. So it's not like we have to get rid of all our thinking. It's seeing that if I'm having an uncomfortable feeling, like so this morning when I was getting ready, oh my goodness, I've been asked, should I speak? What if I cough? I created that experience.
Are you still doing that, Steve? You have been in a lot of webinars, and you still.
That's the thing. It's like we still, and I love how you pointed to that. That what for me, I realized that we seem to have a perfection model, and it's like, no, we have to meet this part before it can be okay. And it was like, no, take that model away and just let it go. We don't need that model. But there will be times like, so this morning when, and it's interesting, I'm saying to you, and I can see the spot exactly where I was standing when I was having this thinking. That's the power of thought and consciousness coming together. It gives us the effects, the image, and everything. But there will be times like I will have that perfection model, because it's like the first time we have a thought, it's just a thought. And then the second time, it can become a belief system. But like what I was saying, just because we think it, we don't have to believe it. So I can have that perfection model and, that's all I was doing. So I can write to you, okay, let's just show up and just see. Versus me running around, oh my God, she wants me to talk. What happens if I. No, give yourself space the best that you can.
And if you give yourself space, you can also just say, okay, we do this.
Yeah.
And
What
it's so much more fun and releasing to just do it when it feels right.
Absolutely.
When you let go of those thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's all about the feeling.
It really is. And you know, like when you'd say to me when I says as a child, I remember at times really sitting, and I know every single person would have had their own experience about um, feeling the feeling of wisdom, our natural state. And I remember there's two things that come to mind here. I remember being in church, and I remember this feeling coming over me. It was like I held on to the seat because I just felt like I was lifting off. Now I wasn't, but it just felt like I was lifting off. That was a very similar experience when I had that moment on Salt Spring. And for me, it was a reminder of like we put so much on our identity that we forget the lightness of who we are. And that was nothing extraordinary that happened there. It was the ordinary and the lightness of our spirit. We're not as dense and as solid as we think we are. And when we see that we are, our system will let us know that we are. We will get uncomfortable feelings or thoughts. And it's just the way of like when you're driving in your car and something comes on the dashboard, a light, it lets you know that something in the car isn't right. And it needs to, we have the same in our own system. It lets us know. And the other thing that came to mind was I remember going to visit my cousin and my bike, and where she lived at that time, there's a really steep hill. And we were told as children not to go down there on our bike. And of course, what do you do as children? You go down there on your bike. And I knew going down, and there was a wall at the end. So if you went down there fast and your brakes didn't work, you were hitting the wall. But I knew I would never hit that wall. I didn't have that thought. I'm not going to hit the wall. I just knew I would never hit that wall. I didn't have identity into the situation. And I know that people would have had very similar when they knew that things were going to be okay, where they just trusted and didn't bring personal thinking to the table. And so what I love about when we see through the eyes of who we truly are, that's what it's about. It's seeing who you are and seeing where things before wisdom has been showing up, where it looked like things weren't going to be okay, and you just knew that they would be okay. Or those moments when everyone was around you, maybe get lost in their thinking and you didn't buy into the situations, or even seeing moments where you did buy into situations. It's all just information of what's going on. If we're in our personal reality making it up, or whether we're in a true feeling reality. And I have got to see, and again, I see this so much more clearly, and then sometimes I don't, but I have got to see that when I'm more in my feeling, I don't know what anxiety is. I don't know what tension is. I don't know what I'm going to be doing next. And I'm okay in that moment. And that moment means that I will be so present to move with whatever comes into my consciousness. And what I've got to see is that that's not just, guess what I know? That's true for everyone. And I've got to see that the principles are not just about how do I get a better life? Because then there's somewhere to get to. But if we see that we are the sacred observer from a spiritual intelligence, then we get to see the simple facts about how the human experience is created through mind, thought, and consciousness. And that's where the feeling comes from.
And it's really the opposite. You don't need to run away to something. It's not something you need to go to. You must bring it back home.
Yes.
It's opposite.
Yes.
And you don't learn that.
Yes.
You don't learn that. You learn that you need to do something. And if you do something, it will come to you. And I have experienced the opposite. It doesn't happen then. It just makes you more up in your head, and it makes it more confused, and you can't solve it.
Yeah, it's like the truth of who we are is not a thinking process.
No, it's not. It's easy to think that it is.
Yeah.
But it's not. And I just love to rest in the nice feeling I get with people and things that I do, and I see that my well-being is coming to me when I do those nice things.
Mm.
And when I feel that I'm up in my head, it's the opposite.
Yeah.
So it's just shown me that it works like that. You have to go inside and touch that.
It's like going inside and realize that we are being touched. You know, like even in that thinking I was having this morning, I was still wisdom in action. I wasn't listening to the intelligence of my wisdom, but wisdom was still allowing me to have the experience. And it's getting to see, it's like, I don't know why this came to mind here. So, where we are in the barn, we have underfloor heating. And this is our second winter of being here. And then we have a beautiful big wood stove burner. And over the last week, it's been really harsh weather here. And when we were in the barn, it's like, oh my God, it's so cold in here. This underfloor heating isn't working. And if you went outside maybe to let our dog out and come back in, it's like, my goodness, it's warm in here. And what I realized was like, you know, when you have a radiator on the wall, that when the heating's on, you can go up, go, oh, that's nice. Or a fire, oh, that's nice. You have something that you can see, and your senses tells you that it's nice. But because you can't see the underfloor heating, and there's nowhere for me to go and do that to, it's like, is it working? And our underfloor heating of wisdom inside of us is always working. And we have paid so much attention to our thinking because our repetitive thinking seems to make a lot of noise. It creates a lot of feeling. And when we overthink, we miss so much of what already is inside of us. So when we were like, this barn is too cold, and then you actually go outside and you realize how cold it is and how it's a different kind of heat. Then this year, we've got so much more used to, no, this is how it works. This is how underfloor heating works. You keep it on all the time. It creates an ambience. It creates a heat that it doesn't come on and off. It stays on all the time. So your home stays at a steady temperature. There's wisdom in action. When we trust that we are the feeling in action, that it's always on, the system's always working, then we will feel that more. And then sometimes we'll go outside and think, oh my God, it's so cold, and come inside and be reminded, oh, my underfloor heating's still working, or my inner wisdom is still working. And then we'll forget because we haven't got that. Because we're so busy being and doing that we think that's what life is about. Well, what I love about what you're saying, or what I hear you saying, and I hope what I'm saying too, is that when we feel wisdom, we're in a timeless zone. It's like the moment doesn't stay still, but we don't have the information or detail to keep us stuck in a moment. And it's a little bit like the other day going out and walking through the mist. When you look out and you just see, I can't see the forest in front of me, but the forest is still there. And that's like when we overthink, we can't see what's in front of us. So we make up what we think is in front of us, but we can still walk through the mist and it will clear. And that's what I've saw. We're a great clearing system.
And that's how I explain why I take so much photo nowadays. I have all my Instagram with a lot of photos because now when I'm out with my dog, I see so much. I haven't seen it. I have seen it, but I haven't seen it. So when I look at the water and the sky and everything, it looks different. And I think, is it Corona? Maybe the airplane haven't been here, so it's the nature feels better, or I don't know. Or maybe it's my seeing. I feel better, and then I see it, and I can be still and look. Oh, there's a bird. Oh, what a beautiful bird. There's a rabbit there over there. Oh, I must take a picture, and I stand still and get present, and oh, there's the rabbit. And I click a photo. And maybe I was so busy before that I didn't see the rabbit or the bird or whatever.
Yeah.
So I think I have a lot of beautiful pictures, photos nowadays. And yeah, that's so beautiful that I can be aware of that now and don't just walk walk away from it.
That puts me in mind of right at the beginning, when the place that I was working in at that time and was in London, and we were living in Brighton, so I had to commute, and the commuting was really, it shouldn't have been a long journey, but it ended up it was. and I was exhausted. And this particular day, there was the South Downs, which is the rolling hills, and Tony and I were going for a walk, and I was really in my thinking, and I was trying to analyze and weigh up and trying to problem solve everything, and I was and talking and talking and talking and talking and marching up this hill and so on. And then at one moment, I just seemed to stop and oh my goodness, listen to all those birds. How, oh my, I said, Steve, those birds have been there for the last half hour.
It could have
I,
been me.
oh my goodness, I've been
Because I can go on talking like that when I'm out with my husband, and he's quiet all the time, and I'm blah 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 blah. You miss everything.
You do. That's the thing. And that's the beauty, I think, of what we're pointing to is like, it's just actually saying that we will fluctuate at times from both those experiences, but we also get the choice of where we look, where our health is. So, like yours and the photographs of noticing that you seem to drop out of thinking when you give yourself permission to be in that space. And that's the same for everyone. When we find that something without it being a prescription or a to-do list, when we just do, like if you go and you say, right, I'm going to go and look for a squirrel and I'm going to find the best squirrel ever, there's a possibility you might not see a squirrel on that walk. But if you just go, you might see 100 squirrels.
My dog saw something.
Oh,
He was sleeping and suddenly just woke up and saw something out there. If you wonder.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. You have a dog too.
We do, and I don't know where she's gone. I think she's over on the other. Yeah, she is. She's lying on one of the other chairs. Yeah, we have a little Cavalier. She's a little tricolor. Oh, how old is your dog?
He's 6 years old.
Mhm.
And we had one dog too, and we lost her for October.
Oh,
It was 11, so he's by himself now, together with us. But it's not the same. I miss Ellie, but yeah, life moves on.
it does. It does, and that's the one thing. It's a given, and I think when we can see that it is a continuation. I mean, I was saying to you about being in India and watching the people. I was fascinated by the fun that they were having in this river, and it wasn't that big, but there was river, and there was one gentleman who started speaking to us, and he told us that the river was coming from up here. When you looked because where we were was at the bottom of the Himalayas, and you could see this waterfall coming over. Um, but this waterfall took different shapes as it was coming down the mountain. So it looked like very different experiences. And then by the time it got to us, just before where they were splashing, it was moving, but it was still. And then they were splashing, and then the bit further down again, it went still. And I really likened that to that's us in lots of ways with our emotions. Sometimes we're really splashing about and not enjoying it, or sometimes we are splashing about and having fun, but there's always stillness there too. That the river is having a different experience, but it's still a river. As human beings, we have different experiences, but we're still a spiritual being having the human experience. And when we more see that the power of who we are is from that spiritual experience, the wisdom of who we are is from that experience, then we can play more than trying to figure everything out and get lost in our innocence of trying to figure everything out.
Yeah, and I think that's it's a thing you must shift your kind of way, because I have seen this for 3 years now, the understanding that it comes from me, everything I experience and think. And now that I know better, I go in another direction. And these 3 years I have opened up for more and more. And new things happens all the time. And I see that there's so much now that I don't know. So I feel that it's better for me to be open for new things coming and just allow myself to be comfortable in that, even if my moods go up and down and I don't always feel like that. But that's the way I need to focus on, even if the moods are going down, because I can see that I'm guided by wisdom, and if I go this way, I feel so much better, and it makes me stronger and stronger.
And I think it also helps us to see, like, when you're climbing a mountain or you're skiing, you have to go up and you have to go down. You have to go up and you have to go. When you go ski, you just don't ski across. You have to go up and you have to go down. And that's the same as human beings. Our consciousness is up and down. But what we get to see is that we don't have to take those down moments as being down. We can just see it's like we will bounce, and then sometimes we might get the feeling of that more because we're hungry or we need to sleep or we're just not feeling ourselves. But the next day after a good sleep, we just bounce up again. So when we see how beautifully we're designed, then we realize it's like, oh, all I had to do was have a good sleep. Is it really that easy to see how my experience is creating that? And it allows us to see that what happens in those moments as our thinking drops, we feel the naturalness of who we are. So there isn't the up and down, there's just the flow of the experience. But in that flow, we get to see that one moment of original thought holds the power to create infinite love. And love we can break into, I don't know, because it's like, I remember when I used to say love before, then I'd question, oh, well, is it about I'll buy you chocolate, so I love you, or I buy you flowers? And it's like, no. Because there's the to do. What I find is that when I feel that moment of original thought, which is happening every moment, then what shows up for me just feels right. So when you'd say to me about doing, shall we just press record now? Yeah, let's do it. There was none of the guy upstairs who was getting ready saying, if she asked me to, yeah, let's just do that. And
I was so happy that you wanted to.
But that's the simplicity, I think, of what we've been pointing to, was just like, I got to see that thinking, I wasn't having a good experience, and that was my thinking creating that experience. But the freedom of just saying, let's see what the moment brings. And what was interesting is I know my backdrop from many years ago would have been, yeah, but she won't like me then. And so I would have made up this story. And what I see innocently is that I or we listen to so many different versions of who people think we are, but we run this story. And that's what I've got to see too, is that I was really good at telling stories about myself to myself.
Me too. Really, 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 really. I can't say how much dark things that I can tell about myself sometimes. But and I for some years ago I wouldn't do this recording at all. But today I feel passion for it. So I will do it because I feel passion, and maybe we can point someone to feel this nice feeling that make that change from the inside.
It's like the difference between, you know, I love the word gratitude, but it's more the feeling that I love.
Me too.
To me, it reminds me that the moments are blessed. It reminds me that I'm always doing the best that I can, and that life isn't out to get me. And that's true for everyone. Versus that I can have attitude sometimes, but I can also be grateful that my attitude only comes from my misunderstanding of thought and my personal thinking of beliefs and what I've made up, and from my stories that I've made up. And I'm aware that sometimes my or our stories can be horror movies, but they can also be comedy shows. They can also be romantic comedies. They can also be thrillers. They can be everything. And our system of mind, thought, and consciousness gives us the side effects and hires all the actors for us and to come and play this movie inside of our thinking. So it's like gratitude and attitude. From gratitude, we feel more the experience of love. Attitude, we have to make it up. And that's all we're ever doing, is making things up. But sometimes it feels so real that you can't tell me that it's not real. And then something happens. I don't know when, but then something happens. It allows me, it's almost like we've been driving about really fast in the car and we just take our foot off the gas pedal. And the car just slows down, our experience just slows down, and we're in a more clearer conscious state. And the divine nature of who we are, we get to see has always been, it's like we get in the car and we think we're driving. But what is really interesting is, like, of course, we're the driver, we switch it on, but with that engine inside that car, we'd be going nowhere. Without those wheels turning round, we'd be going nowhere. So we need that system of the car to get us. We are the system, empowered in the same way. It's still, when I open a car bonnet and look inside, I'm like, whoa, how did you get there? I don't know how it all works, but a mechanic, someone who does know, will immediately, just by hearing, know what's wrong with your car. And we get to understand our system the same way when we see beyond the five senses. Then we get to see that actually our wisdom powers the five senses. So rather than just playing around and what's happening, let's look at, wow. When you see a brand new car, you don't say, there's a fantastic engine inside there. you see what's on the outside. And that's what we've got so lost in. The outside is even more beautiful when it glows from the inside. And we've all had moments of glowing. And it's knowing that we will have moments of glowing again. And then moments where it looks like someone's stolen the sun, and then it will come back again. And then the manifestation of where we come from just seems to allow us to be okay where we're resting. And that could still be with a busy mind. Have you ever done that sometimes where it's like, why am I feeling okay? And my head's going, duh, 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 duh. And I didn't think that was available before. I thought you had to be really calm and really still to feel wisdom. And it was like, no. I made that part up. So when I start listening to not the illusion of what I think thought is, but when I get to trust the feeling. And the difference is like when it comes to feeling it, it's like, oh, what does it feel like? I couldn't really tell you. I don't know if you have that, but I couldn't really say to you, oh, it feels like it's more of a knowing.
Yeah.
More of an awareness.
Indescribable.
Yeah, it's more of an awareness. I'm more aware of, I don't want to engage in the drama. I don't want to engage in.
Yeah, you just know.
Yeah.
You just know.
Yeah. It's like underneath. I think it was Dr. Bill Pettit. It says like we realize that there is a pilot light of hope burning all the time. And it's like in those moments, I can't say, oh, I'm hopeful. I don't have a word to describe it, but it's just that metaphor of the pilot light. It's like, yeah, there's always that spark, that light within. And when I'm not feeling that, I'm in my thinking. And it's just saying,
if you have to argue with it.
yeah.
If it feels simple and clear, I go with it.
Yeah. That's it. But it's simple and clear.
I think this has been a very beautiful conversation, Steve. But I wanted to speak about for a few minutes just what you're going to Sweden. So you have to tell the Swedish people here about your retreat in Sweden.
So off the top of my head, it's February.
Yeah.
And we've called it Less Stress, More Joy.
Yeah.
And I think Ilva and Kia has put on the end and love. And the beautiful thing that I'm looking forward to is that it's a weekend. It's not a retreat setting, but it's a weekend. And we will meet on the Friday evening for a meet and greet. And I will also give a talk. So if there's people who don't want to come to the weekend and just want to come along on the Friday evening, then there will be a talk. But it will also be a way of everyone who's going to be together for the weekend will get to see one another. So by the time we get together on the Saturday, there's no strangers really. Hopefully we would kind of, even if we haven't spoken to everyone, we'll get a sense. The beautiful thing I love about bringing people together, the difference from we have a snapshot of however long you and I have been talking. But when you come into that moment where you hold the intent that inside every single person who will come along to that gathering in Gothenburg already is sitting in innate health and mental well-being. When you see someone is not damaged or broken, and that there is more joy in their true nature, that the searching can stop and who they are is enough. We can talk about that until the cows come home. But when you're resting in it, you get to feel that for yourself. Then you begin to wake up to the experience of who you are. And that's where the real sustainable change comes from. So my hope is that by the time each person, from the beginning to the end, when they leave, they have that little pilot light of hope that they know is inside of them. So it's not a teaching weekend. I'm not going to teach you steps of how to be well. You are well. I'm not going to, it's a little bit like, I could have an itinerary of what I think we need to do. But as a group, we'll explore what we will look at. I think. The beautiful thing is I don't know, but what I know is that the moment consciousness brings us all together, the right moments will arrive for us to explore what is perfect in those moments. It will be the principles underpinning them as taught by Sydney Banks, because my life changed so profoundly when I heard what Sid was pointing to. Not because of Sydney Banks, but because of the energy that he was speaking from, and because of the clarity that I heard inside of me when I was listening. And that's what I want to bring to other people too. So it's a chance to come along. When I talk about trusting wisdom, to actually really get to feel what wisdom is like for you. And the greatness is that when you're around other people, you get to experience and feel an aliveness. And perhaps you are sitting at home. And I say perhaps because I've had some incredible experience sat here on my own watching different things. But I know when you bring consciousness together in a group, beautiful things happen.
That's lovely, Steve. I hope I by myself can go.
That would be wonderful to actually meet you in person. That would be wonderful. I
Yeah.
mean, maybe if you get the information, maybe you could put the information at the bottom or
Yeah,
something.
yeah, I can do that. Yeah.
That'd be wonderful. Then it
I
lets.
was looking for the date, but I couldn't find it. So I look better after the recording.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. So Steve, thank you for this nice conversation.
You're so welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.